It's a pleasure to be back at FiRe and to be having a conversation with Kamran Elahian, the founding investor of Beceem Communications. Kamran came from Iran at age 18 and among many other things has formed, I believe, 6 successful chip companies, including CAE Systems, Cirrus Logic, Momenta, Neomagic, Centillium, and now Beceem. You've got to love somebody whose bio mentions that he's inspired by the revolutionary spirit of Che Guevara and the indomitable peace-loving of Mahatma Gandhi. I should also mention that Kamran came in late from New York last night, but his bags didn't, so we appreciate him joining us. Kamran, where does the name Beceem come from?
Well, before we go to that, first of all, you have to excuse my appearance. I was in World Economic Forum in Jordan at Dead Sea, and then I went to Palestine. I was in West Bank in Ramallah, and then I went to Tel Aviv. And I was trying, being a wimp as I am, I was trying to look tough, so I was wearing some, a little bit more impressive looking outfit to not to be messed around. I'm joking over there, but my luggage got lost, so that's the way I look. Hopefully it will get here. And name Beceem comes from a Persian word which seam is wire and B is without, so Beceem means wireless.
So you are in the WiMAX chip business, is that right?
That's correct. And maybe if I could just get a feel from everybody in the audience, all of you who have heard WiMAX or have some idea about it, maybe you could raise your hand and get a better feel. Oh, good, I don't have to do a lot of introduction on that. Great.
Yeah, how did you, and now with your track record in chip companies, how did you end up going into the WiMAX area?
Well, as some of you might know about my background, I've always been interested in technologies, really bleeding edge technologies that have a chance to change the world for the better and bring all of us together. And definitely communication technologies, the holy grail for that is something that does not require wires to be, brought in at high expense to dig up all sorts of things, and having something which allows you to stays with you as you are moving around the globe, and something that has very high bit rates, and it's all IP based, so that you don't have to worry about your voice or data or video or audio. And WiMAX is definitely that holy grail, especially the version that would come sometime around 2010-11, that is 802.16.m, that promises you 1 gigabit per second wireless as a downlink and 100 megabits per second uplink. So that's the holy grail. Now, we still have ways to go to get to that one, but the one which is available and working right now is 802.16.e that gives you, I guess peak rates are 30, 40 megabits per second, but average usage is about 3 to 4 megabits per second for the downlink, and about 1 to 3 megabits uplink.
Now, we had a panel here 2 years ago with Craig McCaw's longtime CTO, Nick Kauser, who is the president of Clearwire International. And Clearwire has been deploying, but essentially a fixed service. The term WiMAX is used to refer actually to 2 standards, the 802.16d, which is really more just getting you into the house or the building, right? And then 802.16e, which is really intended to get to the end user.
And as a mobile.
In our panel 2 years ago, we were saying that we thought that the E standard would be finalized sometime around 2007, I guess, with equipment really getting into the market maybe in 2008, latter part of 2008. Are we still basically on that schedule?
For United States, yes, but for Korea, actually, they did their trials in 2005, November 2005, the first version of 802.16.e, the mobile version of it, came and they had this APAC conference. They wanted to show off how advanced Korea was from the rest of the world, and they demonstrated a small network of people working on WiMAX. It was very preliminary. 2006, they rolled it off and worked with Korea Telecom, selected Samsung, and Samsung selected our company Beceem to use our chips to deliver WiMAX capability. Their initial expectations were a little bit aggressive, that they were hoping they could have a few 100,000 users by the end of the year, due to all sorts of things, from technical difficulties to getting a lot of system issues worked out, to getting the politics, the potential for cannibalization of other businesses, a lot of marketing issues worked out. 2006 was really a trial and error type of a thing for Korea Telecom. And I always have a test for when something really gets to work is when they start advertising their service, because for a carrier to go and really put serious money into advertising, that's really a key milestone. And they started to do that April of 2007. So that was the time that I said, okay, they must have fixed all the bugs, have worked out a lot of politics, have taken care of the things, because we saw serious ads appearing all over Korea, and their goal is this year, by the end of 2007, have something like 500,000 subscribers. And it seems like it's moving in that direction, but it's too early because they just kicked everything off in April.
And
so far, it looks good.
How has the system been performing in Korea?
From what we hear, it is quite good, and they have really are having happy users. But again, month and a half type of time is not enough to really judge exactly how well it's coming. But they say that it's great.
And this is the service directly to the end user, that is to a PC card, something like that?
There are multiple ways you can use it. One thing which is nice about 802.16.e is a superset. So you have this, you can have it just while you're sitting at your home as a Wi-Fi type of usage in a local area network, or you can pick it up and wherever you go on your cell phone, or if you have it as a card that goes inside your computer, in your laptop, you can have the mobile connectivity, or have it on your phone, or other terminals that many people are feverishly designing. You can use this anywhere, because if you think about why WiMAX makes so much sense, is the high bandwidth that it gives you. The competing technologies that we have today, if you look at the 2.5G, the GPRS is the edge devices that Singular has, many of you who use Singular service, that's only 40 to 50 kilobits per second. And the voice, of course, quality is all circuit switch, and when you go, but the data is IP. And if you go to the next level, the 3G, which people like Verizon are offering, and Sprint as technologies, either EVDO or HSDPA, this gives you average user gets around 400 to 500 kilobits per second on the downlink, and the sending information is around 100 kilobits, which is kind of matching what you get at your DSL at home, typically for average user. What people really need is something a hell of more than that, and that's why Sprint has announced that they are going to go and deliver WiMAX by second half of next year for sure. They're starting sometime next year, 2008. Hopefully by second half it would be all there, and it would be giving you ability to have 4 to 5 megabits per second on average downlink and 1 to 3 megabits uplink, which really allows a lot of things that we need. I mean, you all received in your package today this wonderful, easy-to-use camcorder, and think about it only allows you to do 30 minutes because the local storage of that is very little. If you add WiMAX, you could just be infinitely recording and just have it go all to whatever is your website at YouTube or any other service like that, and have all of the things be stored there, or your corporate website.
There seems to be there's a relationship between bandwidth demands and screen size. As your screens go up, the greater the bandwidth. On the other hand, there tends to be an inverse relationship between screen size and mobility. So for the more challenging mobile applications, you probably don't need the same kinds of bandwidths that you do for, let's say, just the more portable applications like with the PC. But Korea is an interesting case because in countries like Korea, you have people riding trains a lot more than you do here. Yeah. So you really you have the situation where you can have people streaming to a PC at very high bandwidths and actually be moving quite fast. And right. How does WiMAX react in that kind of environment?
Right. Well, fundamentally, one of the things I want to kind of challenge the assumption that you have in there, while you are right, when the screen is small, the requirement for bandwidth goes less. But I'm sure you all have had this horrible experience. You take a picture or you shoot a movie or whatever, and it looks pretty good on your small screen, then you put it on your TV or you put it on your PC and it looks horrible, and you say, oh my God, where did this come from? Or heavens forbid, if you zoomed into something, and because it gives you the digital zoom, it goes in there and doesn't capture more pixels, it just blows the pixels up, and then you go and look at it on a PC or on your, heavens forbid, on your HD TV big screen, and it just looks awful. You say, I don't want to show this to anyone. So the need is, ultimate need, Holy Grail, is to capture everything in high definition. Even as you go through parts of Japan, you will see that in Akihabara, many of the new version of the handheld camcorders are all high definition. So they capture everything at high definition bit rates, so that when you show it on your high definition big screen, it looks good and you won't barf all over it. And that's what drives the demand for it. And the YouTube generation demands everything to be accessible to you in the video format, combined with music, background, audio, all of the things be there. And they want to be sharing it with them. If you look at the camcorders, they love to kind of capture their whole lives, as mundane as it might be to the rest of us, our generation, capture it and share it with people. All of you who have teenagers, I'm sure, have noticed that how they go and capture a video of the latest disco, the greatest band that they were just exposed to, or even their trip to the zoo, they capture it and then they put it on their website, share it with all of their friends. They really have this strong bonding on a continuous basis.
Despite the similarity in name between WiMAX and Wi-Fi and the fact they're both IEEE standards, Wi-Fi is sort of fundamentally different in that it's an unlicensed spectrum. It involves decentralized investment. Anybody can just go and buy their Wi-Fi hub, and it involves very small cells. By contrast, WiMAX, for the most part, is operating in licensed spectrum. The nature of the technology lends itself better to that kind of control. And it involves significant carrier infrastructure as opposed to the decentralized infrastructure, and it involves bigger cells, sort of metropolitan area cells. So in that respect, WiMAX conceptually is really more similar to and competitive with 3G than with WiMAX. Than with Wi-Fi. Interesting, you mentioned Sprint and how they're sort of driving deployment in the United States because they have the biggest bunch of spectrum and are the most aggressive in deploying this. Sprint also has been very aggressive in deploying 3G. So here you've got a carrier that's looking at deploying both. Does that make sense?
Let me first address the first issue that you mentioned, and I come and talk about Sprint. Wi-Fi is a local area network versus WiMAX is a wide area network. One is LAN, one is WAN. On Wi-Fi, as you all know, you have it set up within, I don't know, 100 meters or so. You walk off, you just don't get the signal. So it's only for a small area. WiMAX is a wide area network anywhere you go, and so therefore, when you get WiMAX, you get it everywhere. And the two of them are complementary with each other, but as you look into the future, whenever you have a really good, reliable, high-speed WAN solution, you would really not need the LAN. That's long-term into the future. I mean, we all had cordless phones in our homes, and they were very popular in the 90s. But I hardly ever use the cordless phone at home, or my wife doesn't use it much either, because most of us are accustomed to use our cell phones. Mm-hmm. So whether we are at home within that local area network of the cordless phone, or we are in the office or whatever, one single unit is easily accessible, and if the price is right and all of that, you just keep using that rather than switching. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Mm-hmm. Second thing is Sprint is actually quite visionary of all the operators within the United States, that they have seen the light, they have seen where the world needs to go, because the current offerings that majority of telcos in US who have adopted 3G and are looking at where to go, and in Europe, a majority of the operators have sunk billions of dollars in 3G, and they are reluctant to go and spend money into another thing till they milk their current investment. So there is a huge kind of resistance to go and adopt something that is much better, and that's totally understandable. One way that one can see the whole disruptive capability of WiMAX is if we look at the current offering from the operators, it kind of reminds me of the days of AOL. If you remember on the wired situation, AOL used to be your only way to have an ISP service, and they were trying to have a closed environment, control everything. Do you still remember those AOL keywords? You know, you had to memorize what was AOL keyword before you could go and do a search on something. And but AOL could not stop the progress. They had the monopoly for quite a while, but they could not stop the progress. And other things moved in, and especially with Google coming in, you don't even have to have the perfect keyword. You can just type in whatever, and it figures out what you might want to have, and helps you in finding information regardless of where it is. So the whole idea of control portals, all of this went away. Today, the 3G operators have this amazing fixation, and understandable definitely from business side, that they have to control everything that comes to you, from the user interface, the content, everything that comes to you. They are very reluctant to look at what the world wants, and the world wants a fat pipe, which is wireless, so that wherever you are, you can go into any website, not the ones that they are there, and do searches on Google or whatever similar searches that Yahoo or whoever else can provide for you, that you end up in wherever it is and do whatever transaction you want to do without having to get the permission and the control and all the restriction of this operator. And the same way as Google redefined the whole business model of the wired world, the business model of wireless has to change. We all heard about this wonderful announcement by Apple about iPhone. And iPhone has this relationship with Singular. Well, if you read the press, when you buy iPhone, you will get your voice capability from Singular. But because Singular is 2.5G and its edge devices and the ability to download things is difficult, you do not get your music as a WAN on the 3G network or 2.5G. You have to go to a Wi-Fi place, and there you get it for free, because Wi-Fi is that wonderful free wireless thing, albeit in a small area, that you can get whatever you want. So obviously, there is something broken in that business model, and Sprint is one of the unusual ones. Barry West, who used to be at Nextel, he's quite a visionary technologist behind this, and he says that we need to change this. And who says that the current business model, that you go and buy a cell phone that costs $200-300, but subsidized by these guys, and that therefore they have you sign a contract for 2 years, and they want to control everything? Who says this should be the only business model? Maybe you pay for it yourself, the same way as we go and happily buy our PCs or our Macs or whatever, and we pay for it. We don't ask anybody to subsidize it for us. People will go and buy their iPhones. And yeah, it costs $500 or $700 or $300, whatever the new generation of phones would be. People, if they see good functionality, they will buy it out of their own money. So the carrier doesn't have to put up money on that, doesn't need to subsidize it. And why not have the carrier provide a pipe for you and be like the other ISPs that we have on the wire phone, and look at alternative methods such as advertising to make their money, and have some revenue sharing on various different ways, not being a way that everything has to go through me and create a monopoly.
Well, speaking of monopolies and everything having to go through one company and business models, the 3G versus WiMAX battle was seen by some as, in part, Intel versus Qualcomm. One of the advantages of WiMAX is it's not CDMA, it's OFDM. And so I guess Intel is an investor in Beceem, is that right?
Right.
So how do you see this?
Well, it's not really Intel versus Qualcomm. It's Qualcomm versus the rest of the world. I mean, that's really the truth of the matter. I have never been known to hold back the things and having the tact or whatever. But it really is that. Qualcomm has been a wonderful company, has been great for all of the shareholders, and any one of us who have bought shares have done wonderfully on that. But it has created this monopoly that is taxing and charging everything and whatever. And the first battle was GSM versus CDMA, and obviously CDMA had capabilities that Qualcomm was able to really exploit, and it was a superior technology, but GSM was available in the rest of the world, CDMA was only in US. So various different things happened that finally, we all ended up with cell phones that have got a dual mode, triple mode type of a thing, so we could work in US, we could work in Europe with the same phone and get the things. This took a long time, and US was really held back behind on these things. But for the next generation, everybody, including Qualcomm, seems like have understood or agreed that OFDM is the way to go. Now, OFDM has been natural, has been part of WiMAX from beginning. The key thing on WiMAX is all IP. It's not circuit switch for voice and IP for the data and the rest of the thing. It is using multiple antennas, this technology called MIMO, and it is something that you can set up a whole network at a fraction of the cost of setting up 3G and then trying to add up all of these and other things, and then add another Band-Aid for OFDM, MIMO, whatever, all of the capabilities. And everybody is saying we need to get to a place where OFDM and MIMO and all IP is the final place, except the 3G has to add a lot of band-aids that takes a long time, and their version of WiMAX is called LTE, that is 2-3 years behind, and they're saying that's the way it should go. And WiMAX says, why do we need to have compliance with all of these legacy systems? And too bad many people made the investment, but a new world is upon us. We have to go and jump on it. And if the current carriers don't take that, there are new carriers, like you mentioned Clearwire. There is another one called NextWave that is going to become more famous. It was started by actually, interesting, one of the co-founders of Qualcomm, Alan Salmasi. So there is new CLECs which are coming and challenging the existing things. And it's going to be a very exciting thing to see what happens in the whole world in terms of high bandwidth, all IP, reliable communication. And when you go all IP, especially Cisco has gone with announcing all of these things with IPv6, so they can handle gazillions of number of persistent IP addresses. So your cell phone, your camera, your camcorder, your iPod, everything can have a unique IP address, and Cisco routers and servers would serve all of these things. WiMAX giving you a huge bandwidth. All of these things could communicate with each other, pass information back and forth, restriction-free. And that's the holy grail we are all pushing for.
So all those devices will have embedded Beceem WiMAX chips?
Not all, maybe about 70% of them. We are not that greedy.
It seems as if Qualcomm may be coming around to your view of the world. They recently purchased FiRe, a WiMAX chip manufacturer, for, what, $800 million, something like that?
Yeah, they purchased that not because, publicly, not because they have said that they want to go to WiMAX. They purchased it because it has OFDM capability. FiRe was very early on that. And Qualcomm has agreed that OFDM is very key, and they need to patch OFDM capabilities on the next generations. When you move towards 4G and want to upgrade, go to the next level, everybody has agreed OFDM is the way to go. And so they have done that, and it has been a good move on their part to learn more, have the IPR, have the engineers have all the capability, and also gives them the flexibility that if WiMAX takes off, I shouldn't say if, when WiMAX takes off and this thing comes along, they would have quite a bit of knowledge, know-how to be able to enter that market or go and acquire one of the existing companies or whatever and be a big player. But in the meanwhile, they can just enjoy all of the things that they have and use the OFDM technology that they added as a patch into their existing things and keep upgrading their systems, or some people would say forklifting their systems to get to the next level of technology.
Well, unfortunately, I've just begun to address the questions I was hoping to ask Kamran, but we're down to a minute, so I guess I should throw it open to others for questions. Anybody have any questions?
Yes?
Microphone.
Hi, Dave Geller. Thanks very much. The Clearwire device that's out there, is that using your chipset?
Clearwire is using the Motorola and also some, if I remember correctly, some Samsung equipment. I'm not 100% sure, but they are using equipment from Motorola and a couple other vendors, that some of those vendors are using our chipsets. But our chips are primarily going into the terminals, the cell phones or the devices that come up into that. And Motorola has some of those that use our products.
Their advertised rates, though, seem significantly lower than the rates you've described as being possible. Is it because of the chipsets, or are they restricting?
Well, fundamentally, when your cost of setting up infrastructure is a lot less, if you are going with WiMAX, your cost of setting up infrastructure is a hell of a lot less. And when you have a disruptive technology, you can offer the consumers better service at lower price. that's what exactly they're doing. That's not just our chip. Any WiMAX capable technology would offer that kind of thing.
Also, I should say, with a wide area technology like that, the capacity of the network is a function of how many cells you have. And when you're first starting out and making the initial investment, you tend to have very large cells. So the users need to share that capacity, and you're not necessarily going to get the full capabilities of the technology in the early deployment.
Well, it is something that as they get more and more users, they can add more cells and they can maintain this. But it is something that, yes, you are right. Always network optimization is one of the things any carrier has got to do. But the fundamental fact that WiMAX is a fraction of the cost of setting up a new network is very appealing, not just to Clearwire. If you look at what's happening in India, what's happening in Pakistan, what's happening in a number of countries in South America, anybody who has been left behind in the previous version of getting a DSL or getting a wired capabilities there are all coming up the wireless way, and they're all looking at WiMAX as the way that is much cheaper to get there. So it's kind of interesting way. In some ways, it's equalizing a lot of the emerging economies, disadvantaged countries which have been left behind this to really get on the bandwagon and go and provide the services that they have been lacking for many years.
Well, thanks, Kamran. It's nice to get that perspective from the cutting edge of WiMAX, and we'll keep our eyes on Beceem. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks.